let's start Enterprise Architect. Let's open our model. Let's go to the logical view, design model, manage experts. Yes, so this is where we had stopped. Let's minimize the diagram. Now, if you notice, because of so many things that we did during design, we have got different types of elements and maybe a lot of elements right under this. So we should organize them in a much better way. Yes. So let's create a package and let's call it as a design, right? And let's move everything except the diagrams into that. So here we are left only with the diagrams. Now, even when, see, the concept is very similar to if you have too many files in a folder, what do? You organize them by putting under different subfolders. So same is the case here. Now remember, subsystem itself is a grouping element. So it basically contains the various elements required to carry out the responsibility of that subsystem. So these are groupings on their own right, but they have interfaces. Now let's put these interfaces. We can't put them inside the subsystem because then they get inaccessible. So let's create a package and name it as external system subsystem interfaces, or we could just leave it as subsystem interfaces, and let's move these two into that. Now let's move these three. Add package. Main form menu item is, let's say, this is going to be useful in any use case. So common UI. So main form menu item common UI. Okay. Let's create a separate package where we'll put all these various key abstractions. So let's say online test elements. So what will go here? Subject test parameter, subject question stat, subject stat, reviewer stat, expert stat, expert, creator stat. All these will go into online test elements. And let's create a package where we put all the DB classes. So DB access. So these two will go into DB access. Now expert form, expert manager. These are related to the administration of the software, right? Somewhat related to administration. So let's call it as administration. And expert form, expert manager will go into this. What do we do with this finder? Okay, if we have chosen the technology, till now if you noticed, I have not talked about technology at all. I am doing it in Java. This can be taken care of by the naming service itself of the RMI, since I'll be using RMI for remote method calls. So let me just rename it as naming. Strictly speaking, I should bring it in from the Java framework But since I don't have access to Java framework, I'll create this. And this actually comes from the RMI package of Java. So let me put this inside this. And also, let's say we are going to use JDBC for accessing the database. So the magic that DB class was doing will be done using JDBC. So which means we require some elements from the SQL package of Java. Now let's see, it's easier to create classes using the toolbar. So under that package, I'll create a class diagram so that I get access to this, and then it becomes much more easier. So driver manager connection statement result set. So the relationship between these are actually out of our scope, but driver manager has an operation called get connection, and it has some parameters, so I won't go into all those details. Connection has an operation called create a statement, again some parameters. Statement again has some operations. One of them is execute query and parameter. Now result set has lots and lots of operations. Okay, so basically related to records manipulation, getting a particular field, setting the field, that kind of thing. But given these operations, we can, or we can just guess the connections. So get connection, actually it creates a connection and returns it to and this in turn creates the statement. This in turn, it creates the result set. Okay, so these are the elements that are required from SQL. Now if you notice, I seem to be ending up with too many, because as we keep developing other use cases, this number of packages may increase. So I need to be able to organize them slightly better. So let's create a package. What I'm going to do is apply something called as an architectural pattern. Now basically architectural pattern, specifically layered pattern. Now I basically create or define various layers. So let's say application layer. Since I'm using the notation of the package, but actually I mean layers, I should stereotype them as layer. So I don't have a layer, so let's create a new one. Then I'll create a layer called business layer, and I'll create a layer called middleware. You can name them anything you want, but should be meaningful names. Now what will go where? Now main form, menu item will go to application layer. Then where is our expert form and manager? You could just remember the sequence diagram. So first subject form was coming up, but now we know main form menu item will come, so that you take care of first. Then menu item talks to the form in turns talks to the manager, so bring it into this. Then manager talks to the DB access, that should go to the business. By the way, business is actually a layer, so let's stereotype it as layer. Similarly, middleware is also a layer. Okay, now these two subsystems go to the business layer, online test elements go to the business layer, RMI SQL goes to the middleware, subsystem interfaces goes to the business. Again, if we could look at this hierarchy in a diagrammatic way, it would be much more useful. So under design, I'll create a diagram of type package and I'll drag and drop this. Now I don't want it to show me the contents of the package or layer, so double click in an empty space, go to elements, and if we go down, package contents, remove it. Okay, similarly business and middleware. Let me make it smaller. Okay, so now administration goes here, common UI goes here, DB access goes here, subsystem, online test elements, and subsystem interfaces. So let's make it a little bit more spacious. Okay, and what is there here? RMI and let's say SQL. Remember, if you are not using Java, if you are using some other language or technology, then accordingly the appropriate package and classes will come. So now let's make some space here. Now layered pattern has certain rules. The rule says that a upper layer or a more specific layer depends on a more generic layer, or upper layer depends on lower layer. Similarly, this depends on this. Now, is that the case? So which means we have to now figure out each one of these. So let's start with let's start from the beginning. Okay, let's close this off. Now when the application starts, he logs in, which is a precondition. Main form comes up, that is there here. Main form menu item. He clicks on the menu item, you get the form, expert form. Expert form is here, so this package depends on this package. Expert form talks to the manager, which is there here itself, so no issues. Expert manager talks to DB's access, which returns a testing element. So if it talks to DB subject, it asks get subject, so it gets the subject. So since the subject is returned to the manager, this depends on this. And the manager also talks to the subsystems through its interface. So dependency will be to the interface. Then this realizes an interface which is there here. This realizes an interface which is there here. Right? There are online testing elements being passed as a parameter, right, to the messaging service, but not to HRMS. Remember, this is the messaging service which is part of our system which we are developing, which will in turn talk to the external system. Now DB access in turn, DB classes talk to, not this. Now we know that the DB class talks to SQL classes and interfaces, and we know who's talking to the RMI. What is there in RMI? Naming is there. So form is talking to naming. So show a dependency. What we can do is move it around so that, okay, so which means there is a dependency across layers, right? So here, as far as possible, you should avoid crossing or bypassing layers. But suppose we want to strictly follow that rule. It's not actually a rule, it's a guideline. So if we want to avoid skipping layers, we might have to introduce a class which will just receive a request and pass it on to this, right? So in this particular case, let's say we are going to bypass that guideline. Okay, so that is the overall structure of our system. Here you should make sure that you don't end up with circular dependencies and a dependency from a lower layer to a upper layer. There is one more rule which says that more reusable elements go down the layer. Okay. Now remember, main form, minimum item are going to be reusable across use cases, so we can take it down. But remember, the moment we take it down, what happens? The dependency becomes from a lower layer to a upper layer. Yes. So how do we avoid that? How do we avoid dependency from a lower layer to upper layer? So we have to do further design for such a scenario. There are certain techniques by which we can do that. For the moment, let me just leave it here. Now, as far as possible, you should avoid crisscrossing the lines. So most of the times you will be able to, but sometimes you really can't avoid it. Okay, so that is another step through the design. So let's now, where did our browser go? So our browser, let's go to start portals, Windows project browser. Okay, now let's minimize this. Now I allocated the packages to the various layers in the diagram, and I've also done it in the project browser. So that completes one additional aspect of design. That's it for now. Bye.